Tonight we'll explore poker at its mathematical core. Together we'll look at how hand equity, expected value, and chip EV guide decisions before and after the flop. Each idea will be explained with calm examples, showing how the math plays out at the table. Whether in cash games or tournaments, these concepts shape every winning decision. Hand equity is a fundamental concept in poker. It represents the probability of a hand winning against one or more opponents at showdown. This probability is expressed as a percentage, indicating how often a hand is expected to win if played out many times. Understanding hand equity allows players to make informed decisions about betting, calling, or folding. Calculating hand equity involves considering all possible combinations of cards that opponents might hold. Each combination has a certain likelihood based on the cards visible and the known probabilities of drawing specific cards from the deck. Players use these probabilities to determine the equity of their hand against potential opponent hands. This calculation is crucial for making strategic decisions during a game. Pre-flop scenarios involve determining hand equity before any community cards are revealed. Players estimate their hand's strength against potential opponent hands. For example, pocket aces generally have high pre-flop equity against most other hands. This understanding helps players decide whether to raise, call, or fold before the flop. Pre-flop equity calculations often rely on known probabilities of specific hand matchups. Post-flop situations involve recalculating hand equity as community cards are revealed. Each new card changes the probabilities and potential outcomes. Players must adjust their strategies based on the updated equity of their hand. For instance, if a player holds a flush draw after the flop, they must consider the likelihood of completing the flush by the river. This involves understanding the number of outs and the probability of hitting them on future streets. Examples of hand equity calculations can clarify these concepts. Consider a scenario where a player holds ace-king suited against an opponent's pocket queens. Pre-flop, ace-king suited has about 46.3% equity against queens. This means if the hand were played repeatedly, ace-king would win approximately 46.3% of the time. Understanding this helps players decide whether to push aggressively or proceed with caution. Visual aids enhance comprehension of equity distributions among various hands. Graphs or charts can illustrate how equity shifts with different board textures. For instance, on a dry board with no flush or straight possibilities, a high pair holds more equity. Conversely, on a coordinated board with potential draws, equity may become more evenly distributed among multiple hands. Visual representations make it easier to grasp these shifts and apply them in real-time decisions. The significance of hand equity extends beyond individual hands. It influences overall strategy and decision-making throughout a poker session. Players who consistently evaluate hand equity gain a better understanding of their position in the game. This understanding helps them exploit advantageous situations and avoid costly mistakes. By focusing on hand equity, players can develop a more disciplined and calculated approach to the game. Incorporating hand equity into strategic decisions involves recognizing its role in both offensive and defensive play. Players use equity to assess the risk versus reward of various actions. For example, a player with high equity may choose to bet aggressively, forcing opponents to fold weaker hands. Conversely, with low equity, a player might opt for a defensive strategy, minimizing potential losses. The role of hand equity in poker cannot be overstated. It serves as a guiding principle for players seeking to optimize their gameplay. By understanding and calculating hand equity, players gain a clearer picture of their standing in each hand. This clarity translates into more informed decisions, ultimately leading to improved performance and success at the poker table. Pot odds represent the ratio between the current size of the pot and the cost of a contemplated call. They are expressed as a ratio or percentage, reflecting the potential reward versus the risk. Calculating pot odds involves dividing the amount needed to call by the total pot size after the call. For example, if the pot contains 50 chips and a player must call 10 chips, the pot odds are 5 to 1. This indicates that for every chip risked, the potential reward is 5 chips. Understanding pot odds is crucial for making informed decisions at the poker table. Players use pot odds to determine whether a call is profitable, based on their hand equity. If the pot odds are greater than the odds of completing a drawing hand, the call is considered profitable. For instance, if a player has a flush draw with a 19% chance of hitting, and the pot odds offer a 25% return, the call is advantageous. The relationship between hand equity and pot odds is central to strategic decision-making. Hand equity indicates the likelihood of winning a hand if it goes to showdown. Pot odds help players decide whether the potential reward justifies the risk. By comparing these two elements, players can make calculated decisions that maximize their chances of success. A player with high equity might call or raise, while one with low equity might fold unless the pot odds are particularly favorable. Scenarios illustrating pot odds in action can clarify these concepts. Consider a situation where a player holds an open-ended straight draw. The player faces a bet that requires calling 10 chips into a pot of 40 chips. The pot odds are 4 to 1. If the odds of completing the straight are better than 4 to 1, the call is justified. This calculation helps players decide whether to pursue a drawing hand based on mathematical expectations. Common mistakes regarding pot odds often stem from miscalculating the ratio or misjudging hand equity. Players may overestimate their chances of winning, leading to costly calls. Another error is ignoring implied odds, which consider potential future bets that can be won if the draw is completed. Relying solely on current pot odds, without accounting for implied odds, can result in suboptimal decisions. Tools and resources for calculating pot odds quickly can enhance a player's efficiency at the table. Many poker software programs and apps provide instant calculations of pot odds and hand equity. These tools help players make real-time decisions without manually computing complex ratios. By incorporating these resources into their gameplay, players can focus on strategic thinking rather than mathematical calculations. Understanding how to assess pot odds in different scenarios allows players to enhance their decision-making skills. In cash games, where chip stacks are deep, players might prioritize implied odds when considering pot odds. In tournaments, where survival is key, players may weigh pot odds more heavily to preserve their stack. Recognizing these nuances helps players adapt their strategies to various game formats. The interplay between pot odds and hand equity is a fundamental aspect of poker strategy. By mastering these concepts, players can make informed decisions that align with their long-term goals. Whether deciding to call, fold, or raise, understanding the relationship between pot odds and hand equity provides a solid foundation for profitable gameplay. Expected value (EV) is a mathematical measure used to determine the average outcome of a decision when repeated many times. In poker, EV represents the potential profitability of a play by weighing the possible outcomes and their probabilities. It is a vital tool for players seeking to make informed decisions that maximize their long-term success. Calculating EV involves multiplying each possible outcome by its probability and summing these values. This provides a clear picture of whether a decision is expected to be profitable over time. To calculate expected value in poker, players must first identify the potential outcomes of a hand and their probabilities. Consider a situation where a player holds a flush draw with one card to come. The pot contains 100 chips, and the opponent bets 25 chips. The player must decide whether to call. The probability of completing the flush is approximately 19%. If the flush hits, the player wins the pot, totaling 125 chips. If it misses, the player loses the 25-chip call. Calculating the EV of this call involves two potential outcomes. The first is hitting the flush and winning 125 chips with a probability of 19%. The second is missing the flush and losing 25 chips with a probability of 81%. The EV calculation is as follows. EV equals sign 0.19 class 125 plus 0.81 class minus 25. EV equals sign 23.75 minus 20.25. EV equals sign 3.5. The positive EV of 3.5 indicates that on average, the call is profitable over time. This example illustrates how EV guides decision-making by quantifying the expected profitability of a play. Positive EV situations occur when the expected value of a decision is greater than 0. These scenarios indicate that a play is likely to be profitable in the long run. For example, calling with a strong hand when the pot odds and hand equity suggest a favorable outcome is a positive EV decision. Negative EV situations, on the other hand, arise when the expected value is less than 0. These plays are expected to lose money over time and should generally be avoided. An example of a negative EV situation is calling a large bet with a weak hand and insufficient pot odds. Variance is an inherent aspect of poker that affects short-term results. While EV provides a long-term expectation, variance can cause significant fluctuations in outcomes over a short period. Players may experience winning or losing streaks that deviate from the expected value. Understanding variance helps players maintain perspective and avoid emotional reactions to short-term swings. By focusing on EV, players can make decisions that align with their long-term goals, despite temporary setbacks. Improving EV in everyday gameplay involves several strategies. First, players should consistently seek situations with positive expected value. This requires a solid understanding of pot odds, hand equity, and opponent tendencies. Additionally, players can improve EV by exploiting opponents' mistakes. Recognizing when opponents play suboptimally allows players to capitalize on these errors and increase their expected value. Another strategy is to refine bet sizing. Proper bet sizing can maximize value from strong hands and apply pressure with bluffs, enhancing overall EV. Position is another crucial factor in improving EV. Playing hands from a late position allows players to gather more information about opponents' actions, leading to better decision-making. This positional advantage can result in more favorable EV situations. Finally, players should continually analyze their play to identify areas for improvement. Reviewing hands and seeking feedback from experienced players can uncover leaks in strategy and lead to more profitable decisions. Expected value is a cornerstone of poker strategy, enabling players to evaluate the profitability of their decisions over time. By understanding and applying EV calculations, players can make informed choices that align with their long-term goals. Recognizing positive and negative EV situations, managing variance, and implementing strategies to improve EV are essential steps toward becoming a successful poker player. Chip expected value, or chip EV, is a crucial metric in cash games. It represents the average number of chips a player can expect to win or lose from a particular decision. Unlike tournaments where dollar EV is often more relevant due to payout structures, cash games focus on chip EV. This is because the chips in play directly correlate to real money, making each decision impactful on a player's bankroll. The primary distinction between chip EV and dollar EV lies in their application. In cash games, chip EV directly translates to monetary value. Each chip won or lost has a fixed dollar amount, making chip EV calculations straightforward. In contrast, dollar EV in tournaments is influenced by factors like payout structures and player positioning, which can complicate decision-making. Understanding this difference helps players tailor their strategies to the specific environment of cash games. Consider a scenario where a player holds a strong hand on the river. The pot contains 100 chips, and the opponent bets 50 chips. The player must decide whether to call. Calculating the chip EV of this call involves assessing the likelihood of having the best hand against the pot odds offered. If the player believes they have the best hand, more than 1/3 of the time, calling is a positive chip EV decision. This is because the pot odds are 2-1, meaning the player needs to win at least 1 out of every 3 times to break even. Stack sizes play a significant role in determining chip EV. Larger stacks allow for more flexibility and strategic maneuvering, while shorter stacks limit options. For example, with a deep stack, a player can apply pressure through large bets and raises, potentially forcing opponents into difficult decisions. This can increase chip EV by capitalizing on opponents' mistakes. Conversely, with a short stack, players must be more selective, focusing on high chip EV spots to maximize their limited resources. Maximizing chip EV in cash games requires a combination of skill, strategy, and discipline. One effective strategy is to target opponents' weaknesses. Identifying players who frequently make suboptimal decisions allows for exploitation, increasing chip EV. For instance, if an opponent consistently overvalues weak hands, a player can adjust by betting aggressively with strong holdings, extracting maximum value. Another strategy involves leveraging position. Acting last provides valuable information about opponents' actions, allowing for more informed decisions. This positional advantage can lead to higher chip EV by enabling players to control the pot size and dictate the pace of play. Additionally, players should focus on bet sizing to optimize chip EV. Properly sized bets can extract value from strong hands, while minimizing losses from bluffs that do not succeed. Players should also be aware of the importance of balance in their strategy. While exploiting opponents is beneficial, it is crucial to remain unpredictable. Balancing bluffs with value bets prevents opponents from easily reading a player's intentions, maintaining a higher chip EV over time. This balance ensures that opponents remain uncertain, leading to more profitable situations. Analyzing specific hands and situations is essential for improving chip EV. Regularly reviewing past hands helps identify areas for improvement and refine strategies. By understanding the nuances of chip EV, players can make better decisions that increase their profitability in cash games. This continuous learning process is vital for adapting to the ever-changing dynamics of poker. In cash games, chip EV serves as a guiding principle for decision-making. By focusing on maximizing chip EV, players can enhance their overall performance and financial outcomes. Understanding the interplay between chip EV and stack sizes, exploiting opponents' weaknesses, and maintaining a balanced strategy are key components of successful cash gameplay. In poker tournaments, the distinction between chip EV and dollar EV is crucial. Chip EV refers to the expected value of a decision in terms of tournament chips, while dollar EV considers the monetary value associated with those chips in the context of the tournament's payout structure. Understanding these concepts helps players make more informed decisions that can significantly impact their overall performance. In tournament settings, Chip EV is often used to evaluate the immediate value of a hand or decision in terms of chips. It provides a straightforward measure of how many chips a player can expect to win or lose from a particular action. However, because tournaments feature structured payouts, the relationship between chips and actual monetary value is not linear. This is where $EV comes into play, as it accounts for the tournament's payout structure and the potential financial implications of a decision. Blind levels and payout structures significantly influence the balance between chip EV and $EV. As blind levels increase, the value of each chip can fluctuate, affecting a player's chip EV calculations. For instance, in the early stages of a tournament, when blinds are low, chip EV might closely align with $EV. However, as the tournament progresses and blinds increase, the importance of preserving chips for future rounds can shift the focus toward $EV considerations. The tournament payout structure also plays a pivotal role in this dynamic. In a typical payout structure, the top finishers receive a disproportionately large share of the prize pool. This means that accumulating chips early on might not translate directly into monetary gain unless it significantly increases the chances of finishing in a top payout position. Therefore, players must carefully weigh their decisions, balancing the immediate chip gains against the potential long-term financial rewards. Consider a scenario where a player is faced with an all-in decision on the bubble of a tournament. The bubble is the point where the next player eliminated will not receive any payout, while everyone else is guaranteed a prize. In this situation, chip EV might suggest that a call with a strong hand is the correct play. However, $EV considerations may advise caution, as surviving past the bubble could secure a payout, even if it means folding a marginally favorable hand. Strategies for adjusting play based on chip EV and $EV require a nuanced approach. Early in a tournament, players might prioritize chip EV to build a stack that allows for more aggressive play later. As the tournament progresses and payout structures become more relevant, $EV considerations should take precedence. This might involve adopting a more conservative approach to preserve chips and increase the likelihood of reaching higher payout positions. Successful tournament players often demonstrate an ability to balance these considerations effectively. They understand when to take calculated risks to accumulate chips and when to prioritize survival to maximize their $EV. By studying their approaches, players can gain insights into how to navigate the complex dynamics of tournament play. For example, a player known for their deep runs in major tournaments might employ a strategy that focuses on chip EV in the early stages. They aggressively seek opportunities to build a substantial stack, allowing them to apply pressure on opponents and control the flow of the game. As the tournament progresses, they shift their focus to $EV, carefully managing their stack to ensure they reach the final stages where the payouts are most significant. In contrast, another successful player might adopt a more cautious approach throughout the tournament, consistently prioritizing $EV. They focus on survival and avoid high-variance situations that could jeopardize their chances of cashing. This strategy might involve folding marginal hands even when chip EV suggests a call, as preserving their tournament life takes precedence over short-term chip gains. Understanding the interplay between chip EV and $EV is a critical skill for tournament players. By recognizing how blind levels and payout structures affect these values, players can make more informed decisions that enhance their overall performance. Balancing the immediate chip gains with the potential long-term financial rewards is key to navigating the complexities of tournament play successfully. Ace-King versus Pocket Queens. Pre-flop represents a classic poker scenario, offering a compelling equity test. When the cards are suited, Ace-King AKs holds an equity of 46.3% against Pocket Queens QQ. In contrast, offsuit Ace-King AKO has a slightly lower equity of 43.0%. Pocket queens maintain a lead, with equities ranging from 53% to 57%, depending on the suits involved. This matchup highlights the nuanced interplay of hand strength and strategic considerations. Position significantly influences equity realization in this scenario. When not all in, the player in position can better leverage their hand's potential. Being in position allows for more informed decisions on later streets, as the player acts after their opponent. This advantage can be crucial in extracting value or controlling pot size, especially when holding ace-king. Conversely, being out of position with queens might necessitate more cautious play, as the opponent's actions can dictate the flow of the hand. In scenarios involving shove, call, or fold considerations, stack depth plays a pivotal role. With deeper stacks, players have more flexibility to maneuver post-flop. In such cases, calling or even folding might be preferable to shoving, depending on the table dynamics and opponent tendencies. However, with shorter stacks, shoving becomes a more attractive option, as it maximizes fold equity and simplifies the decision-making process. For players holding ace-king, the strategy often revolves around aggression. Shoving pre-flop can capitalize on fold equity, especially against opponents who might fold hands like lower pairs or weaker aces. When called, ace-king still retains decent equity against most calling ranges, ensuring that the shove is not solely reliant on fold equity. For those with pocket queens, the approach can vary. Against aggressive opponents likely to shove with a wide range, calling or even reshoving may be optimal. This strategy protects against being exploited by frequent shoves and allows the queens to realize their equity. Against more passive players, a more cautious approach might be warranted, as queens can still face significant pressure post-flop. Common misconceptions about this matchup often center on the perceived dominance of pocket queens. While queens are favored, the gap in equity is not as wide as some might assume. Ace-king, particularly when suited, has substantial potential to improve post-flop, making it a formidable opponent. Additionally, the possibility of hitting top pair with a strong kicker or drawing to a flush or straight adds layers to the decision-making process. Players must also consider tournament dynamics when evaluating this matchup. In tournaments, the risk of elimination adds another layer of complexity. While chip equity might suggest aggressive play with ace-king, the potential for busting out must be weighed carefully. Conversely, the preservation of a healthy stack with queens could justify more conservative play, especially near the bubble or in high-stakes situations. Understanding the exact pre-flop equities for AKO versus QQ and the role of position and stack depth is crucial for making informed decisions. By recognizing the strengths and weaknesses of each hand, players can develop strategies that maximize their chances of success. Whether opting to shove, call, or fold, the key lies in adapting to the specific context of the game, including opponent tendencies and tournament dynamics. Pocket nines, often seen as a solid starting hand, hold a favorable position against suited connectors like 10-9 suited, T9s, and 7-6 suited 7 spiels. In a heads-up situation, pocket nines have approximately 57% equity against T9s, which holds about 43%. When facing 7-plie a6, pocket nines equity increases to around 61%, while the suited connectors drop to 39%. These numbers highlight the inherent strength of a made hand like pocket nines against the drawing potential of suited connectors. Stack sizes significantly influence the dynamics between these hands. Larger stacks allow suited connectors to leverage their drawing potential more effectively. The potential for implied odds increases, as players with suited connectors can realize more value from hitting strong hands like straights or flushes. Conversely, smaller stacks limit the ability to extract additional chips post-flop, reducing the advantage of suited connectors. Example flops can illustrate how board texture impacts the equity of each hand. A flop like 9 pump 5 toy heavily favors pocket nines, solidifying their lead with a set. In contrast, a flop such as 8 Philip 7 fun 6-6 provides significant opportunities for suited connectors like T9S, offering an open-ended straight draw. Similarly, a flop with 2 suited cards, like 6-4-4-2 doth, enhances the potential for 7-6 to hit a flush or straight, challenging the dominance of pocket nines. In multi-way pots, the relative strength of suited connectors can increase. The presence of more players enhances the implied odds and the likelihood of hitting a strong hand that can win a large pot. Suited connectors benefit from their ability to connect with a wide range of board textures, making them more formidable in multi-way scenarios. Conversely, pocket nines may face increased vulnerability as the number of opponents grows, especially if overcards appear on the board. Strategic adjustments are essential when navigating multi-way action. With pocket nines, players should focus on protecting their hand by betting aggressively on favorable flops. This approach helps to thin the field and reduce the chances of opponents drawing out. On the other hand, suited connectors thrive in scenarios where they can see the flop cheaply and capitalize on their drawing potential. Players should be cautious about committing too many chips pre-flop with suited connectors, aiming instead to maximize post-flop opportunities. Balancing value protection with long-term profitability is crucial for both hand types. Pocket nines require a strategy that safeguards their equity while extracting value from weaker hands. This often involves a combination of aggressive betting and careful pot control. For suited connectors, the focus shifts to exploiting favorable board textures and leveraging position to realize their equity. Patience and discipline are vital, as chasing draws without sufficient odds can lead to significant losses. Understanding the exact pre-flop equities for pocket nines versus suited connectors provides a foundation for informed decision-making. Recognizing the impact of stack sizes and implied odds allows players to adjust their strategies accordingly. By analyzing example flops and considering multi-way dynamics, players can develop a comprehensive approach to maximize their chances of success. Whether holding pocket nines or suited connectors, the key lies in adapting to the specific context of the game and leveraging each hand's unique strengths. Short-stack tournament play demands a keen understanding of mathematical principles to make informed decisions. At the heart of this strategy lies the expected value, EV, of a shove. The formula for calculating this is EV, shove, FE, trex pot, plus 1 minus FE, trex risk. In this equation, FE represents fold equity, which is the likelihood that all opponents will fold to your shove. Pot refers to the chips already in the middle, before the shove, and call amount is the size of the opponent's call. Risk is the amount you put at stake by going all in. This formula helps players evaluate whether a shove is profitable over the long run. Consider a scenario where you have a stack of 10 big blinds, and the pot already contains 2 big blinds from an opponent's raise. If your opponents fold 60% of the time, you immediately gain those 2 big blinds without contest. This immediate gain highlights the power of fold equity in short stack situations. However, when called, the actual hand equity against your opponent's calling range becomes crucial in determining the shove's profitability. Calculating hand equity against an opponent's range requires precision. Players must consider the possible hands their opponents might call with, and how their own hand fares against these. For instance, if your hand has 40% equity against the opponent's calling range, this percentage is used to calculate the potential gain or loss when the shove is called. This approach underscores the importance of using range versus range calculations rather than relying on estimates. In late-stage tournaments, the danger of underestimating fold equity can be significant. As blinds increase and stacks dwindle, players become more protective of their chips. This shift can lead to increased fold equity, as opponents are less willing to risk their tournament life without a strong hand. Recognizing this dynamic allows players to exploit these situations by shoving more frequently, capitalizing on the fear of elimination among opponents. Identifying profitable shove spots requires a strategic approach. Players should look for situations where their fold equity is high, such as when opponents have shown weakness, or when there are no short stacks left to act. Additionally, considering the stack sizes of opponents is vital. Larger stacks may be more inclined to call with a wider range, reducing fold equity. Conversely, medium stacks may fold more often to preserve their position. Understanding how equity versus ranges is inserted into calculations is crucial for making the right decisions. This involves analyzing the opponent's likely calling range and determining how your hand performs against it. For example, if your hand is a suited ace-king, and the opponent's calling range includes pairs and Broadway cards, calculating your equity against this range provides insight into the shove's potential success. The decision to shove or fold also depends on the tournament's stage and the number of players remaining. As the tournament progresses, the pressure to accumulate chips increases, making aggression a necessary component of success. However, reckless shoves without proper calculation can lead to elimination. Therefore, balancing aggression with precise mathematical evaluation is key. Strategy tips for identifying profitable shove spots include observing opponents' tendencies and adjusting accordingly. Players who frequently fold to aggression can be targeted more often, while those who call loosely require more caution. Additionally, monitoring the table dynamics and adjusting to changes in player behavior can provide an edge in short stack situations. In summary, short stack shove math is an essential skill for tournament success. By understanding the EV formula and applying it to various scenarios, players can make informed decisions that maximize their chances of survival and chip accumulation. The careful analysis of fold equity, hand equity, and opponent behavior enables players to navigate the complexities of tournament play with confidence. Position in poker refers to a player's seat relative to the dealer button, determining the order of action during a hand. This placement is crucial as it influences the amount of information available to a player before making decisions. Acting later in a round provides more insights into opponents' actions, allowing for more informed decisions. In poker, position is often divided into early, middle, and late, with each having distinct strategic implications. Early position, typically the first few seats to the left of the big blind, requires cautious play. Players in these seats must act without knowing how opponents will respond, necessitating stronger starting hands to compensate for the lack of information. Middle position offers a slight advantage, as it allows players to see some actions before deciding. Here, a wider range of hands can be played, though caution is still advised. Late position, including the cutoff and the button, is the most advantageous. Players in these seats act last, gaining the maximum amount of information before deciding. This position allows for a broader range of hands and more aggressive play, including opportunities for bluffing and stealing blinds. The dealer button in particular is the most powerful seat, as it combines the benefits of late position with the ability to control the pace of the game. Position significantly affects equity realization, especially on different board textures. On dry boards, where community cards do not offer many drawing possibilities, players in position can apply pressure with continuation bets, leveraging fold equity. Conversely, out of position, players must navigate carefully, as they lack the advantage of acting last. On coordinated boards, which present potential draws and connected hands, Having position allows players to control the pot size and dictate the action. In these scenarios, players in position can choose to bet for value or check to induce bluffs, utilizing the information gained from opponents' actions. Out of position, players must often adopt a more defensive strategy, focusing on pot control and minimizing losses. Scenarios illustrating the impact of position on decision-making are abundant. Consider a situation where a player in early position opens with a raise. Players in middle and late positions can observe the reaction of others before deciding whether to call, raise, or fold. This positional advantage allows for more strategic play, as late position players can exploit the information gained to make optimal decisions. Strategies for leveraging position to maximize equity involve understanding when to apply pressure and when to exercise restraint. In late position, aggressive play can be highly effective, using position to isolate opponents and control the pot. By raising and betting strategically, players can capitalize on the uncertainty of those acting before them. In contrast, early position requires a more conservative approach. Players should focus on playing strong hands and avoiding marginal situations. By limiting involvement to premium hands, players can mitigate the disadvantage of acting first and maintain a solid equity position. Common pitfalls players face regarding position and equity include overvaluing marginal hands in early position and underestimating the power of position in late stages. Players may also fail to adjust their strategies based on changing table dynamics, such as varying stack sizes and opponent tendencies. Recognizing these pitfalls and adapting strategies accordingly is essential for maximizing equity and improving overall performance. Understanding the nuances of position in poker allows players to make more informed decisions and capitalize on opportunities. By recognizing the advantages and limitations of each position, players can tailor their strategies to enhance their equity realization. This awareness, combined with strategic adjustments, leads to more effective gameplay and increased chances of success. Dry boards in poker refer to community card textures that offer few, if any, drawing possibilities. These boards typically consist of disconnected, low-ranking cards. An example might be a flop, showing 2, 7, and king of different suits. Such textures lack the potential for straight or flush draws, resulting in a static equity distribution among hands. On dry boards, the lack of drawing opportunities means that made hands hold their equity more firmly, while speculative hands see limited improvement potential. Hand equity on dry boards tends to favor strong, made hands like top pair or overpairs. These hands maintain their strength since opponents are less likely to improve with subsequent community cards. Conversely, speculative hands such as suited connectors or small pairs lose value, as the board offers few outs for improvement. This equity stability creates a unique dynamic where players with strong hands can confidently apply pressure, while those with weaker holdings must tread carefully. In scenarios where the flop is dry, players with position gain a significant advantage. The absence of draws allows them to bet with a wider range, leveraging fold equity. For instance, a player holding ace-king on a king-high dry board can comfortably bet for value, knowing that opponents are less likely to have connected with the flop. This strategic edge allows players to control the action and potentially take down the pot without resistance. Betting and bluffing strategies on dry boards require careful consideration of opponents' likely holdings. Since drawing hands are scarce, opponents are more likely to hold made hands or complete air. As a result, continuation bets are often more effective, as they exploit the board's lack of draw potential. A well-timed continuation bet can force opponents with marginal holdings to fold, preserving the bettor's equity. However, bluffing on dry boards demands precision. Players must assess opponents' tendencies and stack sizes to determine the likelihood of a successful bluff. Against opponents who are prone to folding, bluffing with a hand that has some equity, like ace-high, can be profitable. The key is to choose spots where the opponent's range is weak and unlikely to withstand aggression. Recognizing when to adjust play based on board texture is crucial. On dry boards, players should focus on extracting value from their strong hands while avoiding unnecessary risks with marginal holdings. This involves assessing the board's static nature and understanding that opponents are less likely to improve. By adopting a value-oriented approach, players can capitalize on the board's characteristics and maximize their equity. In multi-way pots on dry boards, the dynamics shift slightly. The presence of additional players increases the likelihood that someone has connected with the flop. Therefore, players should be more cautious when betting into multiple opponents. It becomes essential to evaluate the strength of one's hand relative to potential holdings of others. In such situations, players might opt for pot control, checking to induce bluffs or gathering more information before committing chips. Overall, dry boards present a strategic landscape where hand strength and position play pivotal roles. Players must adapt their strategies to exploit the board's characteristics, focusing on value extraction and selective aggression. By understanding how equity shifts on dry textures, players can make informed decisions that enhance their post-flop play. Coordinated boards in poker feature community cards that are closely connected, offering multiple drawing possibilities. These boards often include sequences like 8, 9, and 10, or cards of the same suit, which can lead to straight and flush draws. The presence of these potential draws means that hand equity can fluctuate significantly as the hand progresses, requiring players to adapt their strategies accordingly. On coordinated boards, hand equity shifts dynamically as the potential for straights and flushes increases. For instance, a board showing 8, 9, and 10 of mixed suits creates opportunities for straight draws. A player holding a jack and queen would have an open-ended straight draw, significantly increasing their hand's potential equity. Conversely, a player with a top pair might find their hand's equity diminished due to the various draws available to opponents. In scenarios where the board is coordinated, players must carefully evaluate their hand's strength relative to the board texture. A hand like top pair may not hold as much equity on a board with connected cards compared to a dry board. The potential for opponents to complete straights or flushes means that players should exercise caution when betting or raising. It becomes crucial to assess the likelihood of opponents having drawing hands and adjust strategies to account for these possibilities. Betting strategies on coordinated boards require a more nuanced approach. Players need to consider the range of hands their opponents might hold, especially those that could complete draws. Betting for value with strong hands remains important, but players must also be wary of the increased likelihood of opponents having drawing hands. A well-timed bet can protect equity by forcing opponents to pay to see additional cards, potentially pricing them out of completing their draws. Adjusting ranges on coordinated boards involves a balance between aggression and caution. Players should be prepared to widen their betting range to include semi-bluffs, especially when holding drawing hands themselves. For example, a player with a flush draw might choose to bet or raise, leveraging both fold equity and the potential to complete their draw. This approach can put pressure on opponents with marginal hands, forcing them to make difficult decisions. Recognizing potential draws and their implications is crucial on coordinated boards. Players should be vigilant in identifying when opponents might have completed a draw and adjust their play accordingly. For instance, if the board completes a possible flush, players with strong but non-flush hands might opt for pot control, checking instead of betting to avoid overcommitting chips. Conversely, if an opponent's betting suggests they missed a draw, players can capitalize by applying pressure with well-timed bets. In multi-way pots on coordinated boards, the dynamics become even more complex. The likelihood that one or more opponents have connected with the board increases, necessitating a more cautious approach. Players should be mindful of the potential for multiple draws and the increased chance that someone has completed a strong hand. In such situations, it may be prudent to proceed with caution, focusing on pot control and avoiding large confrontations unless holding a very strong hand. Coordinated boards require players to be adaptable, adjusting their strategies based on the evolving equity landscape. By understanding how connected cards influence hand strength and potential draws, players can make more informed decisions. This involves balancing aggression with caution, recognizing when to bet for value and when to exercise restraint. Through careful evaluation of board texture and opponent tendencies, players can navigate coordinated boards effectively, maximizing their chances of success. Continuation bets, or C-bets, serve as a fundamental tactic in poker, blending fold equity with hand equity. The concept revolves around making a bet on the flop, after being the pre-flop aggressor. This strategy applies pressure on opponents, often compelling them to fold weaker hands. The break-even point for a C-bet is determined by the required fold frequency, calculated using the formula bet divided by pot plus bet. For example, a half-pot bet necessitates opponents to fold 33.3% of the time to break even. A 2/3 pot bet requires about 40% folds, while a full pot bet demands a 50% fold rate. Understanding these thresholds helps players decide when a C-bet is likely to be profitable. Different board textures influence the effectiveness of continuation bets. On dry boards such as those with disconnected low cards or ace-high flops, C-bets tend to succeed more often. These boards offer fewer drawing possibilities, making it harder for opponents to continue without a strong hand. For instance, an ace-high board might intimidate opponents who missed the flop, leading to a higher fold rate. Conversely, coordinated or draw-heavy boards, with potential straight or flush draws, reduce the success of C-bets. Opponents are more likely to continue with drawing hands, requiring players to adjust their strategies. Balancing K-bets with checkbacks is crucial for maintaining an unpredictable playing style. Continuously K-betting can make a player predictable, allowing observant opponents to exploit this pattern. Instead, mixing in checkbacks helps disguise hand strength and can induce bluffs from opponents. This approach keeps opponents guessing and prevents them from easily putting a player on a specific range. For instance, checking back with a medium-strength hand on a dry board can lead opponents to assume weakness, potentially allowing for value bets on later streets. Sizing continuation bets correctly is another essential aspect of leveraging equity advantage. On dry boards, smaller bets might achieve the desired fold frequency, as opponents are less likely to connect with the flop. Conversely, larger bets may be necessary on coordinated boards to dissuade opponents from chasing draws. The key is to adjust bet size based on board texture and the perceived range of opponents. By doing so, players can maximize the effectiveness of their C-bets and protect their equity. Recognizing when to employ continuation bets involves evaluating several factors. The number of opponents in the hand, their tendencies, and the player's table image all play a role. Against a single opponent, a well-timed C-bet on a dry board can often take down the pot. However, in multi-way pots, the likelihood of someone connecting with the board increases, requiring more caution. Additionally, understanding opponents' tendencies, whether they are prone to folding or calling, helps in deciding when a C-bet is appropriate. Continuation betting effectively requires a nuanced understanding of the interplay between fold equity and hand equity. By applying the break-even formula and considering board textures, players can make informed decisions about when to c-bet and how much to bet. Balancing this strategy with occasional checkbacks keeps opponents off balance and enhances a player's overall poker strategy. Through careful consideration of these elements, players can leverage continuation bets to gain an edge at the table. Semi-bluffing in poker involves betting or raising with a hand that is not currently the best but has potential to improve. This tactic leverages both fold equity and drawing equity. Fold equity refers to the chance an opponent will fold to a bet, while drawing equity is the probability of improving to a winning hand. A flush draw, which consists of 9 outs, has a 19.1% chance of completing on the next card and 35.0% by the river. An open-ended straight draw, with 8 outs, offers a 17.0% chance on the next card and 31.5% by the river. These probabilities provide a foundation for evaluating the effectiveness of a semi-bluff. Calculating the expected value EV of a semi-bluff involves considering both fold equity and drawing equity. The formula for semi-bluff EV combines the likelihood of an opponent folding with the odds of improving to a winning hand. If a player bets with a flush draw, the potential gain comes from either the opponent folding or the draw completing. The calculation requires assessing the opponent's tendency to fold, the pot size, and the cost of the bet. If the combined probabilities and pot odds indicate a positive EV, the semi-bluff is justified. Semi-bluffing is most effective in certain scenarios. When facing opponents who are likely to fold to aggression, semi-bluffing can apply pressure and induce folds. Additionally, semi-bluffing is optimal when the board texture suggests that the bettor could have a strong hand. For example, on a board with 2 suited cards, a bet representing a potential flush can lead opponents to fold weaker hands. This tactic is also effective in heads-up situations, where the likelihood of an opponent folding is higher compared to multi-way pots. The distinction between clean and dirty outs is crucial in semi-bluffing. Clean outs are cards that improve a player's hand to the best possible hand. Dirty outs, however, may improve the hand, but still leave it vulnerable to a stronger hand. For instance, in a flush draw scenario, hitting the flush is a clean out, while completing an inside straight draw might still lose to a flush. Identifying clean outs helps in accurately assessing the drawing equity and making informed semi-bluffing decisions. Bet sizing plays a significant role in the profitability of a semi-bluff. The size of the bet affects the fold equity and the risk-reward ratio. A larger bet may increase the likelihood of an opponent folding, but it also increases the risk if the bet is called. Conversely, a smaller bet may not apply enough pressure to induce folds, but reduces potential losses if the draw does not complete. The key is to balance the bet size to maximize fold equity, while maintaining a favorable risk-reward ratio. Understanding the dynamics of the table and opponents' tendencies is essential for successful semi-bluffing. Observing how opponents react to aggression and identifying their calling ranges can inform the decision to semi-bluff. Players who frequently fold to bets are prime targets for semi-bluffing, while those who call down with marginal hands require more caution. Adapting to opponents' behaviors and adjusting strategies accordingly enhances the effectiveness of semi-bluffing. Incorporating semi-bluffing into a broader poker strategy requires a nuanced understanding of probability, psychology, and game flow. By leveraging both fold equity and drawing equity, players can apply pressure on opponents and increase their chances of winning pots. Recognizing optimal scenarios and adjusting bet sizes based on board texture and opponent tendencies are key components of a successful semi-bluffing strategy. Through careful consideration and strategic execution, semi-bluffing becomes a powerful tool in a player's poker arsenal. A flush draw in poker occurs when a player holds 4 cards of the same suit and needs one more to complete a flush. The probability of completing a flush with 9 outs is 19.1% on the next card and 35.0% by the river. These percentages are crucial for determining whether pursuing a flush draw is a profitable decision. To make informed choices, players must compare these odds to the pot odds they are receiving. Pot odds represent the ratio of the current size of the pot to the size of the bet a player must call. For example, if the pot contains $100 and a player needs to call a $50 bet, the pot odds are 2 to 1. To decide whether to call, players compare these pot odds to the equity of their hand. With a flush draw, the player needs at least 33.3% equity to justify calling a half-pot bet. This is because the break-even point for a half-pot bet is when the equity matches the pot odds ratio. When evaluating flush draws, it's essential to consider the size of the bet relative to the pot. For a 2/3 pot bet, a player needs approximately 40% equity to make a profitable call. For a full pot bet, the required equity jumps to 50%. Since a flush draw only provides 35.0% equity across the turn and river, calling a pot-sized bet is generally not profitable unless additional factors, such as implied odds, are considered. Implied odds account for the potential future winnings a player might gain if they complete their draw. If a player believes that completing their flush will allow them to win additional bets from their opponent, the implied odds can justify calling even when the immediate pot odds are unfavorable. For example, if a player anticipates winning another $100 from their opponent after completing the flush, this potential gain can make a call correct, even if the current odds are not favorable. Example hands illustrate when chasing a flush draw is correct or incorrect. Suppose a player holds the ace and king of hearts, and the board shows 2 hearts among other cards. The player faces a half-pot bet. Here the direct pot odds and the flush draw equity align well, making a call reasonable. However, if the bet were a full pot size, and the player had no reason to believe they could extract more chips from their opponent, folding might be the better choice. In cash games, where stacks are deeper and players can rebuy, implied odds play a significant role in decision-making. Players often have more opportunities to leverage their draws and extract value from opponents, making calls with flush draws more justifiable. In tournaments, where chip conservation is critical, the risk of chasing draws without strong implied odds can outweigh potential benefits. The finite nature of tournament chips and the pressure of increasing blinds demand a more cautious approach. Strategically, players should also consider their position at the table. Being in a late position allows a player to see how opponents act before making their decision, providing valuable information on the strength of their opponent's hands. This insight can help determine whether the implied odds are favorable enough to pursue the draw. Conversely, in early position, players have less information and must rely more heavily on pot odds and their assessment of opponents' tendencies. Evaluating flush draws with pot odds involves a careful analysis of both immediate and potential future gains. By understanding the exact odds of completing a flush and comparing them to the pot odds, players can make more informed decisions. Factoring in implied odds and considering the context of the game, such as cash game dynamics versus tournament pressure, further refines this decision-making process. Through this analytical approach, players enhance their ability to navigate the complexities of poker and maximize their profitability. An open-ended straight draw occurs when a player holds 4 consecutive cards and needs one more to complete a straight. This draw offers 8 outs, giving a 17.0% chance to hit on the next card and 31.5% by the river. A gut shot straight draw, with 4 outs, provides an 8.5% chance for one card and 16.5% across 2 cards. These probabilities guide decisions about whether to continue in a hand, based on pot odds and potential future gains. Pot odds compare the size of the pot to the bet a player must call. For instance, if the pot holds $100 and a player faces a $50 bet, the pot odds are 2 to 1. To justify a call with an open-ended straight draw, the player needs at least 17.0% equity for a one-card draw. This means if the pot odds are better than 5 to 1, calling is mathematically sound. For a gut shot, the required odds are significantly higher, often making such calls unprofitable, without substantial implied odds. Implied odds consider potential future winnings if a draw completes. For example, if hitting a straight allows a player to win additional bets, this future gain can justify a call even when immediate pot odds do not. In scenarios where opponents are likely to pay off a completed draw, implied odds increase the value of chasing a straight. This is particularly true in cash games, where deeper stacks allow for greater post-draw profitability. Position at the table also influences decisions regarding straight draws. Being in a late position provides the advantage of observing opponents' actions before deciding. This information helps assess the likelihood of implied odds materializing. In contrast, early position requires more reliance on pot odds and less on implied odds due to limited information about opponents' intentions. In cash games, players often have more flexibility in pursuing draws due to the ability to rebuy and deeper stack dynamics. This environment makes implied odds more significant, as players can extract more value from opponents when a draw completes. Conversely, in tournaments, chip conservation is critical. The finite nature of tournament chips and rising blinds necessitate careful consideration of risk versus reward. In these settings, the potential for implied odds must be weighed against the risk of losing valuable chips. Scenarios where folding is optimal often involve situations with poor pot odds and limited implied odds. For instance, facing a full pot bet with an open-ended draw requires 33.3% equity to break even. Given the 17.0% chance of hitting on the next card, folding becomes the prudent choice, unless implied odds are exceptionally high. Similarly, gut shot draws rarely justify calls unless opponents are highly likely to pay off a completed straight. Opponent tendencies play a crucial role in evaluating straight draws. Against tight players who fold frequently, the potential for implied odds decreases, making it less profitable to chase draws. Conversely, aggressive or loose opponents who are likely to pay off draws increase the value of implied odds, justifying more speculative calls. In tournament play, the pressure of the bubble, or final table, can further influence decisions. During these stages, the risk of elimination often outweighs potential gains from chasing draws. Players must adjust their strategies to prioritize chip preservation over speculative plays, especially when implied odds are uncertain. Evaluating straight draws with implied odds requires a nuanced understanding of pot odds, opponent tendencies, and game context. By comparing the exact probabilities of hitting a draw with the pot odds offered, players can make informed decisions. Factoring in implied odds and considering the differences between cash games and tournaments further refines this process. Through this analytical approach, players enhance their ability to navigate the complexities of poker and maximize their profitability. The tournament bubble represents the phase in a poker tournament where the next player eliminated will not receive any prize money, while those who survive will secure a payout. This creates a unique tension between the desire to survive and the opportunity to accumulate chips. Understanding the dynamics of this stage is crucial for players aiming to maximize their tournament success. Hand equity becomes a pivotal factor in decision-making during the bubble. Players must evaluate the strength of their hands, not only in terms of raw power, but also in relation to their opponent's likely holdings and the current tournament situation. The ability to accurately assess hand equity allows players to make informed decisions about when to push for chips and when to preserve their stack. Effective bubble play often involves a delicate balance between aggression and caution. For instance, a short-stacked player might choose to shove all in with a wider range of hands to apply pressure on opponents who are hesitant to risk their tournament life. Conversely, a player with a healthy stack may opt to tighten their range, avoiding unnecessary confrontations that could jeopardize their position. Recognizing these scenarios and adjusting strategies accordingly can provide a significant edge during the bubble phase. Psychological pressure is a defining characteristic of bubble play. The fear of being the last player eliminated without a payout can lead to cautious or erratic behavior. Some players may become overly conservative, folding marginal hands to avoid confrontation. Others might take unnecessary risks, hoping to double up and secure a more comfortable position. Understanding these psychological tendencies allows players to exploit opponents who are more concerned with survival than strategic play. Exploiting opponents' weaknesses during the bubble requires keen observation and adaptability. Players who consistently fold to aggression can be targeted with well-timed raises and all-in bets. Conversely, opponents who are overly aggressive can be countered with strong hands, capitalizing on their willingness to gamble. By identifying these tendencies, players can tailor their strategies to exploit the specific dynamics of the bubble. In practical terms, bubble play often involves a heightened awareness of stack sizes and position. Players with large stacks can leverage their chips to bully opponents, forcing them into difficult decisions. Short-stacked players must be more selective, choosing spots where their fold equity is maximized and their hand equity is sufficient to justify a gamble. Middle-stacked players face the challenge of navigating between these extremes, seeking opportunities to chip up without risking their tournament life unnecessarily. The concept of fold equity is particularly important during the bubble. Players must assess not only their own hand strength, but also the likelihood that opponents will fold to pressure. A well-timed shove can force opponents to fold superior hands, allowing the aggressive player to accumulate chips without a showdown. This requires an understanding of opponents' tendencies and a willingness to exploit their fear of elimination. The bubble also presents opportunities to capitalize on opponents' mistakes. Players who are overly focused on survival may miss opportunities to accumulate chips, allowing more aggressive opponents to dominate the table. Conversely, players who are too aggressive may find themselves at risk of elimination, providing opportunities for more cautious players to pick up chips without confrontation. In summary, the tournament bubble is a critical phase that demands a nuanced understanding of hand equity, opponent tendencies, and strategic adjustments. By mastering the dynamics of bubble play, players can maximize their chances of advancing in a tournament, while capitalizing on the weaknesses of their opponents. This requires a combination of skill, observation, and psychological insight, allowing players to navigate the high-stakes environment of the bubble with confidence and precision. The Independent Chip Model (ICM) is a mathematical framework used in poker tournaments to evaluate a player's equity in terms of the prize pool based on their current chip stack. Unlike cash games, where chips have a direct monetary value, tournament chips fluctuate in value depending on the remaining field and payout structure. This makes ICM a vital tool for understanding how to maximize expected value at the final table. ICM calculates a player's share of the prize pool by considering the chip stacks of all remaining players and the payout structure. This model helps players make informed decisions by assessing how much a stack is worth in real money terms. As a player accumulates more chips, their equity in the prize pool increases, but not linearly. The first chips won are often more valuable than subsequent ones, due to the diminishing returns in equity. At the final table, ICM impacts decision-making significantly. Players must weigh the potential increase in equity from winning more chips against the risk of losing chips, and thus reducing their share of the prize pool. This often leads to more conservative play, especially for medium stacks, who have the most to lose from unnecessary confrontations. Understanding ICM helps players decide when to gamble for a larger stack and when to preserve their current position. ICM calculations can be illustrated through scenarios where players face all-in decisions. For example, if a player with a medium stack considers calling an all-in from a short stack, they must evaluate if the potential gain in chips justifies the risk of elimination. The ICM model quantifies this by comparing the equity loss from folding with the equity gain from potentially winning the hand. This calculation can reveal that folding a marginally strong hand might be the optimal choice to preserve tournament equity. Adjusting play based on ICM considerations involves recognizing the value of survival versus aggression. Short stacks might take more risks to double up and increase their chances of winning significant prize money. Large stacks can apply pressure, knowing they can afford to lose chips without drastically affecting their equity. Medium stacks often find themselves in the toughest position, needing to navigate between aggression and caution to avoid significant equity loss. Successful final table players often demonstrate a keen understanding of ICM. They adjust their strategies to exploit opponents who misjudge their equity situations. For instance, a player who consistently folds to pressure might be targeted with aggressive plays, forcing them to make difficult decisions. Conversely, players who overvalue their chip stack might be lured into confrontations that cost them significant equity. Case studies of successful final table strategies often highlight the importance of ICM awareness. Players who have mastered the model can make seemingly counterintuitive plays that maximize their long-term equity. For example, a player might fold a strong hand in a spot where winning the pot would increase their chip lead, recognizing that the risk of elimination outweighs the potential gain in equity. Understanding ICM also involves recognizing the psychological elements at play. Players must manage their emotions and avoid the temptation to make decisions based on short-term chip fluctuations. By focusing on long-term equity considerations, players can maintain a strategic edge over opponents who react impulsively to changes in stack sizes. ICM also influences how players perceive their opponent's actions. Recognizing when an opponent is playing conservatively due to ICM pressure can provide opportunities to exploit their cautious tendencies. Conversely, identifying when an opponent is willing to gamble can help players adjust their strategy to avoid unnecessary risks. In practical terms, ICM considerations often lead to adjustments in bet sizing and hand selection. Players might opt for smaller bets to control pot size and reduce variance, or choose hands with higher equity potential to minimize the risk of elimination. These strategic choices can have a significant impact on a player's ability to navigate the final table successfully. By mastering ICM, players can make more informed decisions that align with their overall tournament goals. This requires a combination of mathematical understanding, strategic insight, and psychological awareness, enabling players to optimize their performance in high-pressure situations. An all-in situation in poker occurs when a player commits all their remaining chips to the pot. In tournaments, this decision holds significant weight due to its potential impact on a player's survival and progression. The stakes are high, as going all in can either double a player's stack or result in elimination. Understanding the balance between risk and reward is crucial for making informed all-in decisions. In tournament play, Evaluating risk versus reward in all-in scenarios involves assessing hand equity and the impact on tournament life. Hand equity represents the probability of winning the hand at showdown. Calculating this probability helps players determine if an all-in move is justified. Factors such as position, stack sizes, and opponent tendencies must be considered. A player with a strong hand and favorable equity may decide to go all in, aiming to maximize their chip stack. Conversely, a weaker hand with poor equity might warrant a fold to preserve tournament life. Successful all-in decisions often hinge on precise calculations and strategic foresight. For instance, a player holding pocket aces in late position might confidently push all in, knowing the hand's high equity against most opponents' ranges. On the other hand, a player with a marginal hand like ace-10 offsuit might hesitate, especially if facing a large stack's aggressive play. The key lies in understanding the odds and potential outcomes of the all-in move. Unsuccessful all-in decisions can stem from misjudgments in equity or overestimating the fold equity. A player might push all in with a speculative hand, hoping opponents will fold, only to find themselves called by a stronger hand. This scenario highlights the importance of accurately assessing opponents' likely holdings and their willingness to call. Missteps in this area can lead to premature exits from the tournament. The psychological factors influencing all-in decisions are multifaceted. Pressure mounts as players weigh the potential consequences of their actions. Fear of elimination can lead to overly cautious play, while the thrill of doubling up might tempt players into risky moves. Emotional control is essential, as decisions based on impulse rather than logic can be costly. Players must maintain focus and rely on calculated reasoning to guide their all-in choices. Strategies for determining optimal all-in spots involve a blend of mathematical analysis and situational awareness. Players should consider the size of their stack relative to the blinds and antes. A short stack may have little choice but to shove with a wide range of hands, seeking to accumulate chips and stay in contention. Conversely, a large stack can afford to be more selective, applying pressure strategically to exploit weaker opponents. Position also plays a critical role in all-in decisions. Players in late position can observe the actions of those before them, gaining valuable information about opponents' strength. This advantage allows for more informed decisions when contemplating an all-in move. Early position players face more uncertainty, as they must act without the benefit of observing others' intentions. Understanding opponents' tendencies is vital for optimizing all-in decisions. Players who frequently fold to aggression might be more susceptible to bluffs, while those who call liberally require stronger holdings to justify an all-in. Recognizing these patterns enables players to tailor their strategies, increasing the likelihood of successful outcomes. In some cases, the tournament stage influences all-in decisions. Near the bubble, or during critical phases, players may adjust their aggression levels based on the potential for significant pay jumps. A cautious approach might be warranted to avoid bubble elimination, while a more aggressive stance could be beneficial when aiming to accumulate chips for a deep run. Ultimately, the decision to go all in is a complex interplay of mathematical calculations, psychological considerations, and strategic insight. By evaluating hand equity, assessing risk versus reward, and understanding the dynamics of tournament play, players can navigate all-in situations with confidence. Mastery of these elements enhances a player's ability to make sound decisions that align with their overall tournament objectives. A multi-way pot occurs when 3 or more players remain active in a hand after the initial betting round. These pots present unique challenges and opportunities in poker, as the presence of additional players significantly impacts strategic decision-making. Unlike heads-up situations, Multiway pots require players to consider a broader range of potential hands and outcomes, making equity calculations more complex. In multiway pots, hand equity is distributed among multiple players, each with a potential claim to the pot. As more players join the action, the likelihood of any single hand winning decreases, necessitating careful evaluation of relative hand strength. A hand that might be strong in a heads-up scenario could become vulnerable in a multi-way context, where the combined equity of opponents' hands can outweigh its potential. The distribution of equity in multi-way pots often hinges on the specific hands involved and the community cards that are dealt. For example, a hand like pocket aces may hold a commanding lead pre-flop, but its equity diminishes as more players enter the pot. Conversely, speculative hands like suited connectors or small pairs may gain value in multi-way situations due to their potential to hit disguised strong hands on the flop. Strategic adjustments are crucial when navigating multi-way pots. Players must be more selective with their starting hands, considering not only their absolute strength, but also how they perform against multiple opponents. Hands with good implied odds, such as suited connectors or small pairs, can be profitable in multi-way pots due to their potential to win large pots when they hit. Decision-making in multi-way pots involves assessing the likelihood of various outcomes based on the number of opponents and their playing tendencies. For instance, a player holding a strong draw might choose to play aggressively, leveraging fold equity to thin the field and increase their chances of winning the pot outright. Alternatively, a player with a marginal hand might opt for a more conservative approach, seeking to minimize losses while waiting for a favorable situation to develop. One common strategy in multi-way pots is to focus on value betting rather than bluffing. With multiple opponents, the probability of at least one player holding a strong hand increases, making bluffs less effective. Instead, players should aim to extract value from their strong hands, betting in a way that maximizes potential returns while minimizing risk. Recognizing when to engage or avoid multi-way pots is a critical skill. Players should be mindful of their position at the table, as acting later provides valuable information about opponents' actions and intentions. Being in a favorable position allows players to make more informed decisions, adjusting their strategy based on the dynamics of the pot. In some cases, it may be prudent to avoid multi-way pots altogether, especially when holding a hand that performs poorly against multiple opponents. Hands that rely on high card strength, such as ace-king, may struggle in multi-way situations where opponents can outdraw them with coordinated hands. In such scenarios, folding or playing conservatively can preserve chips for more favorable opportunities. Understanding the dynamics of multi-way pots also involves recognizing the potential for collaboration among opponents. Players may inadvertently work together to isolate a single opponent or force them out of the pot. Being aware of these dynamics can help players adjust their strategies to avoid being caught in unfavorable situations. In summary, multi-way pots require a nuanced approach that balances aggression with caution. By carefully evaluating hand equity, understanding the implications of multiple opponents, and making strategic adjustments, players can navigate these complex situations effectively. Recognizing the unique challenges and opportunities presented by multi-way pots enables players to make informed decisions that capitalize on their equity and enhance their overall poker strategy. An equity-based mindset in poker centers around consistently evaluating hand equity and expected value across various situations. This approach involves making decisions grounded in mathematical probabilities rather than emotions or hunches. By focusing on the statistical likelihood of winning a hand, players can make more informed and profitable choices. Incorporating equity evaluations into daily play involves a systematic approach to each hand. Before acting, players should assess their hand's strength relative to the possible range of opponents' hands. This assessment requires understanding the concept of equity, which refers to the share of the pot a hand is expected to win on average. By calculating equity, players can determine whether to bet, call, or fold based on the likelihood of their hand winning by the showdown. A practical way to incorporate equity evaluations is to use tools and resources that provide insights into hand probabilities. Poker software and equity calculators can simulate various scenarios, offering players a clearer picture of their hand's potential. This practice helps players internalize equity concepts, allowing them to make quicker and more accurate decisions during live play. Scenarios showcasing the benefits of an equity-focused approach often highlight situations where players avoid costly mistakes by relying on mathematical reasoning. For instance, a player holding a strong draw might choose to semi-bluff based on the combined equity of their draw and the potential fold equity. By understanding the odds, they can decide whether the risk of betting outweighs the potential reward. Another example involves recognizing when to fold a seemingly strong hand due to unfavorable equity. A player with top pair might face a large bet on a coordinated board. By evaluating the potential hands their opponent could hold, they might determine that their equity is insufficient to continue, saving chips for more favorable spots. Overcoming emotional biases in decision-making is crucial for maintaining an equity-based mindset. Emotions can cloud judgment, leading players to make irrational choices. Tilt, or emotional frustration, can cause players to chase losses or play recklessly. By focusing on equity and expected value, players can detach from emotional swings and make decisions based on logic and probability. One strategy for overcoming emotional biases is to establish a routine that reinforces an equity-focused mindset. This routine might involve reviewing hands after a session to analyze decisions and identify areas for improvement. By consistently reflecting on their play, players can reinforce the habit of prioritizing equity considerations. Fostering a long-term equity mindset in poker requires cultivating patience and discipline. Players must accept that short-term results can be influenced by variance, but over time decisions based on solid equity evaluations will yield positive outcomes. This mindset involves embracing the process of learning and adapting, continually refining strategies to align with mathematical principles. Players can also benefit from setting specific goals related to equity-based decision-making. These goals might include tracking the accuracy of equity calculations during sessions, or practicing with equity calculators to improve speed and precision. By setting measurable objectives, players can monitor their progress and stay motivated to develop their skills. Engaging with the poker community can further enhance an equity-focused mindset. Discussing hands with peers or participating in study groups allows players to gain diverse perspectives and insights. By sharing experiences and strategies, players can deepen their understanding of equity concepts and learn from others' approaches. Ultimately, an equity-based mindset empowers players to approach poker with confidence and clarity. By consistently evaluating hand equity and expected value, players can make decisions that maximize their potential for success. This mindset transcends individual hands, influencing overall gameplay and fostering a strategic approach that prioritizes long-term profitability.